Dr. Robert Sanders is Senior Distinguished Lecturer in the National Security Department at the University of New Haven and joins us now live to talk more about all of this. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Good morning, Josh. Glad to be here with you.
Good morning. So first off, I know this is kind of a loaded question, but help break down how all of this played out and how we got to where we are right now.
Well, the genesis of this whole thing is that Donald Trump left the White House with documents that should never have been with him when he left the White House, should have been collected, should have gone to the National Archives, and should now be secured as they are after they were seized from him. So he left the White House with these documents. He should not have left the White House with them. Once they were discovered that there were documents that he probably had custody of that he should not, he was asked to return them. He did not return them. Ultimately, he returned a few. He had these documents stored in manner that was not consistent with their security levels. They should be stored in what's called a SCIF, a sensitive compartmented facility that has no windows, doesn't allow cell phones in, guarded and locked, has a combination, etc. He had them in a bathroom, in bedrooms, in closets and cabinets and desk drawers. After he was asked to return these documents by the authorities, not only did he not return them, but he then began a series of actions to hide them from his own attorneys, hide them from the FBI, hide them from the National Archives. Ultimately, after attempts to gather these documents and indications that from him, signed off by his attorneys, which he deceived in the process, that he had turned in everything, it was ultimately determined that he had not, because there were 3 separate occasions where they tried to get these documents, and when they did, they found that there had been documents that had been withheld. In a conspiracy to withhold them, they were moved around before his own attorneys went to look at them, and moved around before the FBI came in to collect them. Ultimately, the FBI obtained a search warrant and went to Mar-a-Lago, the former president's residence, and executed a search where they found even more documents. That's how we got here. Donald Trump willfully, as the allegation in the indictment says, withheld these documents that he, as a private citizen, without a need to know or the clearance or the proper storage facility for those, continued to hold on to and refused to return when asked to do so.
What about the charges that he does face? We're talking about 37 felony counts here. Can you help break those down for me? And more importantly, what the punishment could be? Because, of course, we know there is the potential for actual prison time here.
Yes, so the first 31 counts are espionage charges under the Espionage Act, and the next 7 are under various conspiracy or other charges. Those national security charges relate specifically to what he did and what he didn't do with the documents, i.e. he withheld them and he didn't turn them in when requested. The last charges are the conspiracy to hide the documents, to shuttle the documents, to mislead the federal investigators and the federal authorities who were trying to collect these documents, and the conspiracy with his as we call him, a body man or butler, to move these documents. That individual is, to his own chagrin, on videotape moving these boxes, as I understand it from the indictment and the evidence they have. Now, in terms of the punishments, the conspiracy charges and that other group, each one of those counts was potentially up to 20 years in prison, and the espionage charges are 10 years in prison for potentially for each. Now, of course, a conviction, they could be sentenced consecutively or concurrently. Concurrently being you don't add them onto each other. So if you're convicted of 2 charges, each covering 10 years, your max could be 20. But if they're concurrently, you'll still only be at 10 years of potential imprisonment.
What stood out to you the most about the indictment itself? We're talking a document that was almost 50 pages there. What stood out to you, and was anything about it surprising?
Well, Donald Trump has gone way past surprising in his actions in the presidency and his actions following his what I can call the disastrous term of office. Now, surprising. The scheme as depicted by the indictment from special counsel and the U.S. attorneys is significant, detailed, full of various types of evidence. It's not just one piece of evidence that goes in one direction. There's evidence of Donald Trump's own words on video and tape. There's evidence of video of his underling, his co-conspirator acting. There's evidence from the notes of his attorneys who were taken contemporaneous to the actions where Donald Trump actually misled those individuals and brought them into the criminal conspiracy. Why the attorneys get to testify is because of what's called the Crime Fraud Act, and under that provision, if you use your attorneys to help perpetuate criminal activity, your attorneys don't have that attorney-client privilege that normally would hold. It gets eviscerated by using your attorneys to commit a crime. In this case, it was the conspiracy and the withholding that those attorneys lost that attorney-client privilege piece. So those are all significant. The documents themselves, there's only summaries, and there will only probably see summaries because, of course, if we showed the documents, you would then expose the national security information that contains with them, are pretty striking on what is in each one of these documents, from detailed maps on potential military operations to the capabilities of our own military forces, to the capabilities of adversary countries, to the capabilities of friendly countries. He held all of these documents in areas that were unsecured and open to public access.
So I guess the big question is, and as you mentioned, we're never going to know the full extent of the documents and what's actually in them, but does it appear that they would have posed a national security risk based on your expertise here and your experience? Definitely,
without question, that a foreign power could gain intelligence from these documents if they were able to intercept them and look at them.
What should we expect for today's surrender?
Let me add to that also, to a level of embarrassment and interference with our foreign relations as Edward Snowden did when he released his documents.
So my last question for you here, what do we expect for today's surrender, the arraignment itself? I assume it's all going to be fairly brief, right?
Well, there's actually some steps that have to be accomplished. So Donald Trump will turn himself in. He will be formally taken under arrest and be now in the custody of the United States government as essentially a prisoner with Secret Service protection. Yeah, you can't get around some of the irony of this. And after that, they will do the normal processing of an arrestee. They will do a digital fingerprint recovery. They may or may not take a mugshot. They will take down certain particulars about him, where he lives, who he lives with. Obviously, we know what his job is now, running for office. And they will prepare those things to pass on to the Marshal Service. The Marshal Service will then take him also and process him for their purposes, because once you are now in the system, the marshals are responsible for you. Again, he continues to have Secret Service protection, so there'll have to be some type of general federal lash up on how they're going to do these things. And finally, he will go to the arraignment, where he'll actually appear before a magistrate judge. I think the judge's name is Johnson, but don't quote me on that. And he will present the formal charges. He'll ask Donald Trump through his attorneys, does he want a reading of this, all the counts of this indictment? He will either ask for that or he'll waive it. There'll be a formal presentation of it, the actual documents. Now they've done that attorney to attorney, but now we're documenting it in court that it has happened. And then Donald Trump will be asked how he pleads. The assumption is he's going to plead not guilty, and consistent with his public statements on this matter. And the judge will then accept the plea. If he didn't plead, the judge would enter a plea on his behalf of not guilty. We're assuming he's going to plead. And then after that, the magistrate will decide whether or not the conditions exist for Donald Trump to be released on his own recognizance, or whether a bail amount should be attached, and how he has to pay that bail. And then there'll be some other formal activities. For instance, his passport may be confiscated. There may be conditions on release presented. Now, one of the conditions of release, which is a really touchy one here, is Donald Trump has had a propensity to attack the court system and the media. Now, attacking the media is not such a big deal in terms of the trial. It doesn't affect the prosecution or his own defense, only to the extent that the public listens to it and thinks about it, and it may affect the jury pool. But attacking the judges not only does all of those things, but it also puts people in the judicial process in physical danger, based on January 6th, based on the words of some errant words of some of our politicians, one who said we were at war, a completely errant statement and unconscionable for an elected official to talk about things like we should do the Civil War. I spent the last week with the Army War College. I was on Gettysburg, Antietam, Sharpsburg, and Shepherdstown battlefields. And the carnage that we're talking about in the American Civil War, it's far away and we don't remember it. But on one day, on one of those battles, 54,000 Americans died. Now, we don't ever want to go back in that direction, but the loose words of people who have a propensity to deal with guns is a problem. And the magistrate may decide that he must say something as it relates to this, as it relates to Donald Trump and potentially riling up masses. The federal authorities and the state authorities and the city authorities right now are preparing for anywhere from 5,000 to 50,000 demonstrators to show up during this process. Will they be peaceful or not? No one knows, but they keep hearing through the chatter that there's no conspiracy that they can identify that's going to happen today. But what they also keep saying is the rhetoric sounds a lot like the rhetoric pre-January 6th, and that's concerning. So the magistrate may have feel the requirement to talk about that. Now, the slippery slope of that, of course, is Donald Trump has First Amendment rights. Donald Trump is also a candidate for president and is out campaigning, and actions that would interfere with his ability to campaign would also be a problem and prohibited.
All right, Dr. Robert Sanders, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. We appreciate it.
Glad to be with you, Josh. You have a great day.
All right, you too.